everyone, today I'm going to show you how to make a sock owl. This is a great project for you to recycle some items of clothing that you might have lying around. If you're anything like me, you may have some socks, some mismatched socks. This is a good way to use them and put them towards a fun project. For this project, so you'll need a sock, you'll need a piece of scrap fabric or a piece of felt that you can use for the log that your owl is going to sit on. You'll need a pair of fabric shears or fabric scissors, a pair of snips that you can use to trim your threads, some thread. Ideally, it would be the same color as your sock. If it's not, that's okay. You're not really going to see it in the project. You'll need some embroidery thread, so that's just a thicker thread, and that's going to be used for the feet of your owl. You'll need a seam ripper in case you make any mistakes. Hopefully we won't need that. You'll need some tailor's chalk or any kind of fabric marker or fabric chalk that you can use to mark onto your fabric. I have a variety of buttons here. I'm going to decide later which button I think goes best with my owl. That's going to be for the eyes of your owl. And you'll need some pins to hold the fabric together. Also a needle for sewing. I'll be using a sewing machine for some of the steps of this project. If you don't have access to a sewing machine, that's okay. You can do it all by hand if you need to. So the first step after you've chosen your sock, you need to turn your sock inside out. So I'm going to turn my sock inside out. And you want to draw some lines on your sock where you're going to cut it. And so we actually don't need this whole ankle part. We're going to cut it right before the heel. So I'm going to draw a line here. So I'm going to try to flatten it out this way. I'm going to draw a line right before the heel here. And I'm going to mark a line straight along here. And then at the toe of the sock, I want to create a peak. So I'm going to mark that at the top of my sock. And I'll try to make it as even as possible. I'm going to use my seam gauge here just as a ruler to make that line. And then I will do that on the other side. So these lines right here, this is where I'm going to cut my fabric. So I'm going to cut along the lines that I just drew using my fabric scissors. So these scraps, if you have another project you could use them for, I guess you could save them or you can discard them if there's no other project to use them for. So now I have this shape here. It's kind of like a little house shape. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually on my sewing machine. So I'm going to go to my sewing machine and I'm going to sew this peak here, this V. So from here and down, I'm going to sew that. On my machine, you can sew it by hand as well. So I'm going to quickly go and do that. So I'm back from the sewing machine, and as you can see, I've sewn this top part here. I sewed fairly close to the edge. You don't want to get too close. You want to make sure that there's not going to be any holes when you flip it right side out. And so I'm going to turn it back right side out now so you can see how the seam looks on this side. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to sew across here. So when I sewed this, I sewed it with the sock inside out, and this part I'm going to sew with the sock right side out. That's an important piece there. So I'm just gonna sew where I want to fold down to make my little beak for my owl. So wherever I want that to be, I'm gonna sew a straight line right across here. And I'm gonna do that with my sewing machine. Again, you can sew that by hand, but I'm just gonna quickly sew that with my sewing machine. So now that I've sewn the top part here, I'm ready to stuff my owl with, I have some cotton here. So with the cotton, you want to just pull it apart a little bit, otherwise you're going to get these weird lumps when you stuff your owl. So I'm going to stuff it as much as I want to make the owl as big as I want. All right, so I'm happy with the amount of stuffing in my owl now. So next I'm going to move on to hand sewing. So first I'm going to prepare my thread. I need about, I'll start with roughly 2 arms length of thread. I'm going to snip that and I'm going to thread my needle. All right, so to sew the owl closed, I want to go around. I'm going to be moving in and out through the fabric, trying to keep it as even as possible. And I'm going to go all the way around the perimeter of the bottom of this fabric. So just like I'm doing here, I go all the way around. So once I get back to where I started, I'm going to start pulling the bottom closed. So it's like a drawstring bag. I'm going to pull it closed. And as I pull it closed, I just want to tuck these raw edges inside so that they're not showing on the outside of the owl. So it looks nice and neat. And then to finish this off, you just want to pick up a little bit of fabric and you go through your loop there, and that will tie a knot. And I can do that a few times just to make sure that it's nice and secure. So the next step in my owl project is to sew down the nose or the beak here. So to sew this down, I just want to pick up some fabric on the bottom where I want to have the nose sitting or the beak sitting. I keep calling it a nose, but it's a beak. And then I'll pick up some fabric on the other side, and I just want to go through the bottom layer, not the top layer. And that way you're not going to see it on this part of the fabric. You're just going to see it on the bottom part, which is what we want. We want it to be invisible. So I'm going to do that a few more times to make sure it's nice and secure. Go. And when I feel like it's secure, I'm just going to pick up a little bit of fabric underneath here. I can go through some of the thread, and just like before, I'll go through the loop and that should tie a knot and help to secure it. Then I'm just going to snip the threads, and there we go, we have our beak. So the next part I'll do is sewing on the eyes, which are the buttons. So I just have to decide which buttons I like with my owl here. So to start with sewing on my button, I'm just going to decide where I want it to go. And then I'm going to kind of pinpoint that spot. I'll pick up a little bit of fabric there, just so I make sure it'll end up in the right place. And then I'll go through one of the holes on my button, and then I'll go through the other side here and back down through the fabric. Then I'm gonna come up through the other side. Sorry, make sure you see that there. And then go through. So you're just going to be going around, sewing through the different holes, going back and forth through the different holes. You're gonna keep doing that until your button feels nice and secure. All right, so once I feel like my button is fairly secure, I can pick up a little bit of fabric underneath the button and again tie a knot. So I just have to do the second button. All right, so next I'm going to be creating the log for my owl to sit on. So you could really use anything for this. You could even use like a stick that you found in the woods, or you can get creative with this part as well. All right, so I'm just going to roll this up nice and tight. So to help me sew this, I'm just gonna put in a few pins to secure it. And I just wanna sew this end closed here.
Go.
All right, so next I need to sew my owl so that they're sitting on the nice little branch here. So I'm going to take some embroidery thread this time. Just going to thread my needle. And I'll set up my thread just like before. So this is where I'm going to create the feet of the owl also. So I need to figure out where I want to start to get the feet of my owl. I think there is fine. So I'm actually going to just wrap this around the log and go through my owl again. Just here on the side. And I'll wrap it around again. There we go. And then I'm just going to tie a knot. So pick up a bit of fabric and tie a knot at the bottom. I'll just trim those threads. So to create the look of the feet, you can just take the thread, the two strands of thread that you have, and spread them out a little bit. Just like that. So it looks like you have little feet. And the owl's just sitting on this nice little branch there. So there you have it. That's my tutorial for how to make a sock owl. You can personalize this however you want. You can use different buttons, a different color sock, a different branch, whatever you want to make it your own. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Thank you.